I lived with my husband, Thomas, and his son from a previous marriage, Richard. Although I treated Richard as if he were my own son, he never truly opened up to me, and this went on for an entire year. One day, while Thomas was on a business trip to New York, Richard, who had never approached me to talk before, suddenly started a conversation. "Actually, I've always wanted to tell you about this, but Dad told me." Saying so, Richard handed me his smartphone. I was shocked by the photo displayed on the phone. After hearing the details from Richard, I decided to divorce Thomas. However, there were various complex circumstances involved. My name is Jennifer. I live with my husband Thomas and Richard, who isn't biologically related to me. I used to work as an office lady, but after getting married, I quit and became a full-time housewife. I met Thomas when I was still working, during a business transaction, and we both fell in love at first sight. According to Thomas, before marrying me, he had been married to another woman and had a child, but his previous wife suddenly disappeared. He could only get in touch with his former wife through the lawyer, and didn't know where she went, so they ended up getting divorced. Naturally, Thomas took custody of the child. I did have reservations about marrying him under such circumstances, but with Thomas's persistent pursuit, and considering my feelings for him, I decided to go ahead. Our relationship was pretty smooth sailing. But there was one concern. That was about Richard, the son who isn't related to me by blood. I had met Richard several times before getting married, but he never truly warmed up to me. Back when we got married, Richard was still in elementary school, so I assumed he might have been missing his biological mother, and that's why he wasn't opening up to me. However, even after living together as a family for a year, Richard still hadn't opened up. He always ate the meals and packed lunches without leaving any leftovers and would give basic greetings like good morning and good night, so there weren't any major issues. However, he never shared stories from school or about his friends. Even when I tried initiating a conversation, it would usually be short-lived. Since I treated Richard like my own son, it was a bit saddening that he wouldn't open up to me. "Hey Thomas, can we talk?" I thought if our relationship with Richard stayed this way, it'd be problematic in the long run, so I wanted to bridge the gap now. I decided to talk to Thomas about it. "What's up? It's been a year since we started living together, hasn't it?" "Yeah, has it been that long already?" "So, what's up?" "Well, it's about Richard. He just won't open up to me." "Thomas, has Richard told you anything about me?" "Nope, he hasn't mentioned anything special." "I was worried that maybe he didn't like me." "You know, he's always been a mama's boy. He didn't warm up to me easily either. He clung to my previous wife until the day before she was no longer around. The sudden change in both his environment and losing his mother must have stressed him out. Anyway, I'll talk to him about it again." "Thanks. But he's probably just confused, so don't be too hard on him, okay?" "Of course I won't be." Thomas was always there to listen. He was always there for advice, no matter how minor. He was so thoughtful and caring. At that moment, I was truly grateful to have him. At least, up until that time. With Richard asleep, we were enjoying some quiet time together when Thomas began to speak. "Sorry for the short notice, but I've got to head to New York for a business trip the day after tomorrow." "New York? This is sudden. How long are you gonna be gone?" "There's some trouble at the main office in New York. They need some extra hands. They said it'd be for about 3 days." "Gotcha. Sounds tough. I'll get some of your things ready then." "Thanks. That'd be a big help." Thomas was going on a business trip to New York. I didn't mind that, but what worried me was Richard. This could be a chance to bond with him, but we've never been alone together. I had this nagging feeling of what if something happens. But what's decided is decided. Gotta roll with it. And the day Thomas was to leave for his business trip arrived. "Take care of Richard for me. If anything comes up, just give me a call, okay?" "Thanks. Have a safe trip." "Will do. I'm off." "Take care." After seeing Thomas off, I went about my usual routine, sending Richard off to school and doing household chores. Before I knew it, it was 3 p.m. Richard should be home any time now, I thought. Right on cue, I heard the front door open. Richard was home. "Welcome back." "I'm home." With that, Richard headed straight for his room. It was just like any other day, but I was hoping for a chance to bond, so I was a bit disappointed. I was heading back to the kitchen to start dinner when I heard him. "Mom." To my surprise, Richard, who never initiated a conversation, was speaking to me. And he called me Mom. I felt my eyes well up, but I saw that Richard looked quite serious. "What's up?" "Well, there's something I've been keeping from Dad." He trailed off without finishing. "Take your time." "Dad told me not to tell, but..." Saying that, Richard extended his left hand to me. Richard handed over his phone. "May I?" I took the phone he handed me. On the screen was a picture of some sort of document. I zoomed in to see it more clearly. It was a document about the divorce between Thomas and his previous wife. It looked like there had been a contentious court battle over it. "Dad told you my previous mom just disappeared suddenly, right? That was all a lie. In reality, Dad forced me away from her. I've wanted to tell you this for a long time, but Dad threatened to kick me out if I did." Tears streamed down Richard's face as he spoke. "You've been so brave holding this in." "It's okay now." I hugged Richard. I could never have imagined such a young boy carrying such a heavy burden. "I want to see my previous mom." Richard kept on crying as he spoke. I never imagined my husband would do such terrible things to Richard. It's unforgivable. Although we're not blood related, Richard was like my own son. I'm sure his birth mother felt the same way. I don't know how my husband managed to separate Richard from his birth mother, but because of him, Richard's heartbroken and crying like this. That hurt me more than anything as Richard's mother. At that moment, I decided to get revenge on my husband. According to Richard, there were documents in a photo that were in my husband's room. So, while he wasn't home, I decided to gather the evidence. I found them. The documents were tucked away in a drawer of my husband's desk. I grabbed them and went to the nearby print service spot to make copies. When I was done and headed home, I noticed a strange woman loitering in front of my house. "Excuse me, can I help you with something?" As soon as I approached her, she turned and ran without a word. "Hey!" I was hesitant to chase after her. After all, she hadn't threatened me in any way. It might not be a good idea to run after her. But who could she be? Puzzled, I went inside. Regardless, I was determined to get my revenge on my husband, so I didn't have time to dwell on it. Later, I read through the copied documents to find out how my husband had managed to separate Richard from his previous mother. What was written was shocking. What on earth? The documents detailed a custody battle over Richard. It claimed Richard's birth mother abused him, so custody was granted to my husband. However, the birth mother had always insisted she hadn't abused him. Even if the birth mother had been abusive and custody had gone to my husband, Richard still yearned to see her. What's going on here? If there had truly been abuse, wouldn't it be best to keep Richard away from her for his own safety? Time flew as I grappled with these thoughts. But soon, I'd discover an even more shocking truth. It was the third day since my husband left for a business trip to New York. He was supposed to return today, but last night, I got a message saying, "Sorry, it's gonna take longer than expected. I won't be back for another 2 days." I wished he'd never come back. Thanks to that, I had more time to prepare for the divorce. Then, the doorbell rang. It was rare for anyone to visit, so I opened the door curiously. It was the same woman I'd seen in front of the house the other day. Concerned that a stranger was on my property, I demanded, "What do you want? If you don't have any business here, leave. If you don't, I'll call the cops." As I was about to close the door, she blurted out, "Wait! Is Richard here?" I couldn't fathom how a stranger would know Richard's name. I'm so sorry for causing any discomfort. I'm Richard's birth mother. She showed me a child's health record book. Richard's name was clearly written in it, along with the birth date that matched. It must be genuine. And under the mother's name, it read, Mary. I remember hearing from my husband a while back that his ex-wife's name was Mary. This must be that same Mary. I figured it'd be awkward to just stand and chat at the door, so I invited her in. So, what brings you here? I had Mary take a seat and served her some coffee before getting straight to the point. Do you know the circumstances of Thomas and my divorce? I've heard that Richard was taken from Mary by Thomas. Other than that, I don't know the specifics. That's right. He was taken from me, that's not wrong. If it's not too much trouble, can you fill me in? I'm currently preparing to divorce my husband. Oh, I see. Sure thing. To put it bluntly, Thomas is a big liar. What do you mean? Did you know Thomas had debts? No, I've never heard of such a thing. I see. He hid it from me as well. And that's why Thomas took Richard away. He probably did it to repay his debts. Thomas took Richard and then demanded alimony and child support from me. I couldn't grasp the situation. The story I heard from my husband was entirely different, and I never imagined my husband had debts. But, doesn't that sound off? Actually, I found some documents in my husband's room. I then took out a copy of legal documents I found in his room. It seems there was a lawsuit after he took Richard. It doesn't make sense to me that a man with debts can get custody. And here, it says Mary abused Richard. What's that about? That's a lie Thomas came up with. I never abused Richard. What do you mean? You said that Thomas took Richard away to pay off his debts and then demanded alimony and child support from me, right? Thomas knew he wouldn't get custody as long as he was in debt. So, he made up a story that I was abusing Richard and fabricated evidence. But if the evidence was made up, couldn't you have just proven your innocence, Mary? That's the embarrassing part, I couldn't. I'm not familiar with legal stuff and didn't know what to do. So Mary couldn't refute my husband's testimony and lost the case, and everything went as he wished. Finally, everything I had been wondering about made sense. Richard had told me back then that he had been separated from Mary by his father, but looking at the court documents, it said that Mary had been abusing Richard. I was wondering why he'd want to see a mother who supposedly abused him, but little did I know that the story was fabricated by Thomas. I'm sorry. Even if I didn't know, I shouldn't have married Thomas and effectively taken Richard away from you. No, it's all right. I should have been more careful, so it's on me. How's Richard doing now? He's doing well. He should be home soon. Would you like to meet him? Is that okay? Yes. Richard has been wanting to see you too. Knowing that the abuse allegations were false, I deemed it safe for Richard and Mary to meet. I suggested that we wait for Richard's return. While we were talking, Richard came home right on cue. I'm home. Welcome back. We have a guest. Can you come to the living room? A guest? All right. Saying that, I led Richard into the living room. Mom! I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. And then Mary and Richard hugged each other tightly. It was a truly emotional reunion between mother and son. Seeing this, my anger towards my husband grew even more. I couldn't believe he made up the abuse story just to separate these two. I can't forgive him. After the two had calmed down, Mary and I began planning to get back at my husband. We decided to do it on the day he returned from a business trip. I'm home. Finally, my husband returned from his trip. Welcome back. It was tough out there. It was. I'm gonna tell them no more business trips for me. As my husband was changing out of his suit, I said, "Can you sit down? I've got something to talk about." And I made him sit. What are you talking about? You know, your previous wife, Mary. She suddenly disappeared, right? Yeah, she did. Well, Richard started saying he wanted to see his previous mom. I see. Things like that happened while I was away. Sorry for causing trouble. And so, I met her. At this point, I presented the documents from the court trial that Thomas had been hiding. What's this about? You said Mary just disappeared out of the blue, right? Well, yeah, I did, but I left some details out. Didn't think you'd want to hear the long story. What about the debts? Why do you? You took Richard to repay the debts, fabricated evidence that Mary was abusing him, forced your way into getting custody, and demanded compensation and child support from her, didn't you? How do you know about that? Right, Mary? As I said that, the door from the adjacent room opened and Mary came out. On the day Mary came to our house, we plotted together to bring Thomas down. Why? I called her here. I heard all about it from Mary. Jennifer, calm down. You're being deceived. Mary is a terrible mother who hurt our precious Richard. As for that, after collaborating with a lawyer this time, it's been proven that all evidence of me abusing him was fabricated. Saying that, Mary slammed the lawyer's investigative report down in front of Thomas. What is this? Mary and I collaborated. We gathered all the false evidence you used during the past trial and additional proof that your claims were lies. We had a lawyer check everything out, so there's no doubt. This is nonsense. Are you two having fun trying to bring me down? That's it. Where's Richard? If I talk to Richard, he'll instantly know you two are lying. Seeing the evidence must have finally hit Thomas, because he started demanding to see Richard. I figured I should call Richard over. Richard, your dad's calling for you. Can you come? It's okay. You both are with me. For this day, I made sure to tell Richard that I would be divorcing Thomas. Richard said that as long as he could be away from his dad, that was fine with him. I brought him. Richard, you're on Daddy's side, right? Don't be fooled by Mommy, okay? The moment Thomas approached Richard, he exclaimed, "No! Don't touch me!" and ran over to our side. Listen to me. No! I hate you, Dad! The angry husband approached Richard, trying to forcefully pull his hand. At this rate, Richard's gonna be taken away again. Thinking I had to do something, Mary stepped in before anyone else could move. I won't let you do as you please any longer. With that, Mary stood in front of Thomas, blocking his path. Move. After failing to care for Richard properly, you dare act like his mother now? True, I lost the custody battle back then, and felt helpless. I had to let go of Richard. But now it's different. Jennifer is here, and more importantly, Richard wants to stay away from you, Thomas. That's all the proof I need. As Mary spoke up, Thomas, possibly at the end of his patience, looked like he was about to strike her. I quickly stepped in and stopped my husband's hand. You'd better stop. You're only adding to your guilt. What's the deal? All of you, ganging up on me? I've recorded everything, so our lawyer can review it later. If you don't want to add more charges, apologize to Richard and Mary and leave. Darn it. Why? Richard, I told you not to talk about this. It's all your fault. Lies eventually come out. If you want to blame someone, blame your past self. Shut up. It's because of you guys doing this. Then, my husband was about to hit us again. Didn't I tell you a minute ago? We're recording. And just so you know, children ain't toys or convenient tools for parents. If you understand, get out and never bother us again. Hearing my firm stance, my husband seemed to lose all will to fight and slowly left the house. And so, Richard and Mary were finally freed from my husband's grip. From then on, we communicated through our lawyer. Apparently, my husband wanted to apologize in person to Mary, Richard, and me, but of course, we refused. I didn't even want to see his face or hear his voice. Who knows what he'd do if we met in person? He was ordered to pay alimony to Mary and child support for Richard. I wasn't directly harmed by my husband, and from Mary's perspective, I seemed to be on the wrong side too, so I didn't claim any compensation for myself. My husband was exposed for all his past wrongdoings, and due to that, he quit his job. I have no idea where he is or what he's doing now, and frankly, I don't care. As for me, I managed to secure custody of Richard and we're living happily together. I explained the situation to my previous employer and got to return to work. I thought about moving, but I didn't want to put any more emotional strain on Richard, so we decided to stay. I've consulted with our lawyer, so if my husband tries to show up at our house, they'll handle it right away. I feel safe. Mary comes over to see Richard on her days off. She was visiting on this particular day too. This is the alimony and child support my husband got from you, Mary. I can't accept this. It's okay. In a way, I'm at fault too. Normally, my husband would be the one to pay this, but I decided to return it to Mary as a gesture of apology. I understand. I'm sorry for the trouble. Thank you. With that, this matter finally comes to a close. Mama, I'm home. Welcome back. Richard, welcome home. Now that he's in a more stable environment and occasionally meets his biological mom, he seems much happier than when he lived with just my husband and me. Richard calls me Mom and refers to Mary as Mama. It's been a challenging journey, but seeing Richard's happy face makes me believe it was all worth it. Moving forward, Mary and I are gonna work together to ensure Richard's happiness.